Every bug-type Pokemon explained. What are they? Noggin by Lockstin Gnoggin.
Of all of the Pokemon types, Bug is the simplest to explain, but it does have an interesting history. For a time, it was a terrible type to be.
Yes.
So many common weaknesses and so few good moves. It was almost a worthless type back in Gen 1 and 2, but these days, it's just as good of a type as the rest of them, and that's thanks to repeated buffs gen after gen. But when it comes to explaining why the various Bug-type Pokemon are Bug-type, it's quite simple. They are all bugs.
Okay.
Well, that is except for a few of them. There are a few that get a little gray into whether or not they should be Bug-type or not.
Sure.
And I'll be saving those ones for the end. For now, let's explain what the Bug-type is all about and why each Bug-type Pokemon is what it is.
Okay.
Icky.
It has been a while since I don't think I've ever watched any of these videos, actually. The different types explained. I'm into this. I like exploring, like, okay, this is the thing, but why is the thing? So this is going to be really fun.
Germy, creepy, tiny, cute, lovable, petable things. There are quite a large variety, especially since bug is the general term for many, many things. It includes insects, arachnids, some arthropods, and more. And
Right.
while most are tiny, some are very large.
Massive.
Keep that away. Thankfully for me, I don't have to worry about the big ones here in Oregon, but in the tropics, there are billions of them of varying size.
I saw a video recently about a new, like, giant stick bug that was found in Australia fairly recently as of reacting to this. Very funny. This thing is massive. I think it's like, what? Only 14 inches. I'd have to double check what the actual measurements were.
Total mass of all bugs easily outweighs everything else on land, so it
Based.
makes sense that many bug-type Pokemon are extremely common. And speaking of the bug Pokemon, they are massive for bugs! This one's the size of a horse!
Yeah!
Of course! A horse! Just think of the logistics there. Alright, I'm calm. So let's categorize these Pokemon with similar ones and start with the OG bug Pokemon, Caterpie. Based on the eastern tiger swallowtail in its caterpillar state, these spots on its body aren't actually its eyes. Well, maybe they are on Caterpie. Pokemon are weird, but if this Pokemon were accurate, the eyes would actually be tiny, tiny little specks right here. Cute. The eye marks are for scaring away predators, of course, because Caterpie are delicious treats to
It's a defensive adaptation.
Spearow. Metapod are just the boring chrysalis stage of the caterpillar when they wrap themselves up and sleep forever, and they
Right.
then become a beautiful butterfly. In this case, Butterfree. Sort of a generic butterfly, but its wings most closely resemble that of the black-veined white butterfly. Other Pokemon that go through the same metamorphosis are Wurmple and Scatterbug. Scatterbug and its evolution Spupa are both sort of generic also. They seem to most closely resemble the larval forms of the carpet moth and clothes moths, the moths that eat fabric, and considering the fashion theme of 6th gen, that makes sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense, yeah. Like, I love how deep that goes. Like it's considerations and things like this that you don't ever really think of until it's brought up. You're like, that makes a lot of sense, and then it's additive.
Oh, they evolve into Vivillon, a butterfly, not a
Different
moth.
patterns.
So that brings us back to the generic aspect, as moths and butterflies are hard to tell apart before their middle stage. And Vivillon is different depending on where you live. And as
Right.
such, it somewhat symbolizes all of the minute changes that can happen over spread out generations of butterflies across the world. It's really cool how tiny changes in DNA over generations can do that. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. Literally. As for Wurmple, there are plenty of pink caterpillars, such as the pink sphinx. And then there's the slightly less pink but more horned elm or four-horned sphinx.
Sure.
Combining these two would get you Wurmple, who then evolves into either Silcoon or Cascoon, both cocoon stages of the metamorphosis. And then finally either Beautyfly or Dustox. Now, there are no real caterpillars or worms that can turn into a butterfly or a moth, but they are close enough that it works for a Pokemon, I suppose. Beautyfly seems like a generic swallowtail butterfly, and
Sure.
Dustox is based on the Luna moth. So let's talk about moths now.
Don't Luna moths like not have a mouth or something? I'm trying to remember what it is, but like as soon as they actually become the moth stage, like they're on a timer. Yeah, it's kind of messed up.
Vesta and Volcarona are some of my favorite Pokemon.
based. Oh my god, Slitherwing. I made out like a bandit with Scarlet and Violet because I got not only Volcarona, but I got Slitherwing, who is easily top 5 for me. And I also got Iron Moth. Man, I made out like a bandit this generation.
Partially because I also happen to love moths. They are based on the Atlas moth or the Cecropia moth, as well as the saying, attracted like a moth to a flame. Clever. Venonat is named after the gnat, like noggin with the silent G, but it's a bit of a misconception when it comes to being based on one because it isn't. Gnats are very small blips that you normally can't see the details of because they are so tiny, so they just look like little fuzzy balls in the air. But this is a gnat up close, and this is a mite. What Venonat is actually based on, at least according to its name in other languages, as well as its poison typing and its behavior according to the Pokedex, and basically everything besides the English name. It then evolves into Venomoth, which is a very generic moth. But because of its poison typing, it's likely based on moths from the Arctinae family. I'm probably mispronouncing that, as that family of moths are the poisonous moths. Though the coloration, especially of the shiny Venomoth, points to Morpho butterflies. Man, Game Freak sure likes to confuse moths and butterflies a lot. Surskit is easy.
It's okay. They look similar, therefore it's fine. I would see the favorite part. One of the favorite parts about what I do is quite literally, like, a Lepidopterist could come across this and be like, well, actually, because of this, literally their field of expertise, right? Literally moth person, right? Like, their entire field of study is moths, right? Like, actually, this is the reason. That is, like, one of the, like, number one just best things that I come across is, like, people who have, like the experience in a field who can, like, clarify the thing, right? Because, like, gaming is what connects people, right? Like, you can have an arachnologist talk about Galvantula, and you can have a Lepidopterist talk about, like, Venomoth, right? You could have someone who specializes in birds talk about, you know, differences in beaks, right? You know, and then they talk about maybe something like Darwin and the Finches, right? And that's how you get, like, you know, things like Pelipper versus something like Kilowattrel, right? Like, it is so fascinating to see just how many different kinds of people from all different walks of life and professions that Pokemon attracts to have such cool conversations.
Based on the Garaday or Water Strider or Jesus Bug, these guys go by a lot of names, but they are easily identified as they live right on the water's surface, skating around, not sinking in because of the way they spread out their body weight as to not break the surface tension of the water.
Right.
And then, for whatever reason, Surskit, the pond skipper, evolves into Masquerain, the moth thing. Well, maybe? It's got these big wing things that look like huge eyes, which many moths do, but then it also has the head shape of a lanternfly and the flight pattern of a damselfly, so it's kind of all over the place. Pokemon are allowed to do that, but I wish I could pinpoint it. Burmy are based on bagworms, which are little worms that grab onto things from their surroundings and makes a little protective bag around itself, from leaves to rocks to trash. It just does whatever it can to survive. The cute little hobo. Then it evolves into either Wormadam or Mothim, depending on its sex. Female bagworms never fully mature into their moth stage like the males do. The females stay at home all day and collect child support money. And these aren't even the only bagworm Pokemon. There's also Pineco and Forretress. One is a bagworm resembling a pinecone, and the other looks more like a clam, honestly. It even has cannons resembling the jets that some clams and mussels have, so should it really be bug-type? Well, the Pokedex does list both of these as bagworm Pokemon, so I guess so. Then, other bug Pokemon that go through a similar metamorphosis, but not into butterflies or moths, are the lines of Weedle, Swadloon, and Grubbin. Grubbin is just that, a grub, which is the larval stage of a beetle. Nothing much else to go on. But when it evolves into Charjabug, you know.
I actually hadn't considered what the life cycle of a beetle was. I just assumed they kind of hatched as, like, tinier beetles. That actually makes a lot of sense.
What even is a Charjabug? It looks...
It's just a slightly armored grub.
It's kind of like a wrapped-up, cocooned bug, but not quite. It's just so square. It's more of a battery than a bug. Notably, though, there is the Denkimushi caterpillar in Japan, whose sting is said to feel like an electric shock.
Amazing.
And it is similar in color, so there's that. But then the final form is Vikavolt, which is based on either a Cyclomatus or a stag beetle, or a weird mix of the two. And then there's Sewaddle and Swadloon. They are based on the caterpillar and chrysalis forms of the silver-spotted skipper butterfly. But then, instead of evolving into yet another butterfly, they become a walking leaf bug. Good one. And then Weedle goes against the norm even more. It's a little worm that then becomes a cocoon mixed with the larval stage of a bee, a cocoona, and then into a Beedrill. So at least the last two stages make sense, though Beedrill isn't a bee, it's an Asian giant hornet. Pokemon that are bees, however, are Combee and Vespiquen. Combee is a honeybee that is also the honeycomb within beehives, which is where they store their eggs and honey. And also, they are almost entirely male. The occasional females have this spot on their head, and that means that they are able to evolve into Vespiquen, the queen bee of the hive, as beehives are ruled over by a single queen. And then there's Cutiefly and Ribombee, both completely adorable, and both based on the Bombolide beefly. That was fun to say.
Actually, no, these are based off. I also like that bees just vibrate to heat up the air around them when they're trying to deal with a threat. They just literally cook the whatever's threatening them. It's wild.
Bombolide beefly. Another bug that flies is Yanma and Yanmega, its evolution, which looks like a military helicopter, and that's really cool. Yanma is a dragonfly, clearly, perhaps specifically the red-veined darter. And Yanmega are based on the Meganeura, a now extinct dragonfly that were massive. Cicadas are also flying insects, and in Pokemon they are Nincada, Ninjask, and Shedinja. Nincada is the nymph stage of the cicada, and when it evolves into both Ninjask and Shedinja, Ninjask is the fully grown cicada, and Shedinja is the leftover husk that cicadas are famous for leaving all over the darn place. Buzzswole is an ultra beast based on a very, very ripped mosquito. Those darn little bloodsuckers. Illumise and Volbeat.
I love it, dude. Honestly, Buzzwole was such a good thing that Gen 7 gave us. Just like, oh, he's so good. He's just swole. He flexes. I actually love him. I don't think he was super competitively viable, but he was honestly really cool.
Are both Firefly Pokemon that love each other, as Fireflies are often depicted in romantic scenes in media, especially because the fire on these flies is used to signal each other and find a mate. Cute. Ledyba and Lydian are both obviously based on ladybugs, not much more to go off with them. Scyther and Scizor are based on praying mantises and mantid flies, which are just mantises with larger wings.
I actually didn't know that.
And Pinsir doesn't fly.
His Mega does.
Until it Mega evolves. Pinsir is based on the Stag Beetle too, just like Vikavolt, but specifically, Pinsir seems to be the Lucanus Mansulife moratus Hopi. And similar to Stag Beetles are Rhinoceros Beetles, which Heracross is based on. And when it Mega evolves, it becomes much more similar to a Hercules beetle. Another beetle is Carablast, which is a mix of the Scarab beetle, a Japanese rhinoceros beetle, and the Carabus blaptoids, which is famous for eating snails. And Escavalier is the same beetle inhabiting a stolen shell.
That's actually really cool. I like that. I like how that interplays between the Carablast Shelmet evolution method. That's actually really good.
As they do. In this case, it's the shell of a Shelmet, a snail nautilus worm thing, which evolves into a Selgor, a very fast slug snail bagworm thing. Love being specific. Good job, Game Freak. And speaking of hard shells, Durant is a very durable ant with an exoskeleton of steel. And an exoskeleton is tangentially a shell, kind of. So that was a bad transition. But moving on, Genesect also has an exoskeleton of steel. In fact, it's a man-made one, as Genesect is a science experiment by Team Plasma. They took some revived fossil Pokemon and made modifications to it, including the shell, the cannon on its back, and who knows what else. There are plenty of theories on what ancient Pokemon they took, but it may not even be a Pokemon we know about at all yet. But one thing is for sure. It is an insect from the Paleozoic era, which was about 300 million years ago when insects were massive. Kricketot and Kricketune are based on crickets, clearly. Those loud buggers that keep you up at night and make delicious reptile treats.
Right.
Venipede, Whirlipede, and Scolipede also all have exoskeletons. It's like they're bugs or something. The first two forms are based on the pill millipede. Millipedes that are very short for being millipedes, but are able to curl up into a small pill and...
I just realized that watching this, I like Golisopod and Wimpod, because I'm pretty sure that they're just isopods. I have to double check though.
Roll around. The last evolution, Scolipede, is based on the Scolopendra genus of centipedes, which are very, very large.
Amazing.
Not bigger than a horse though, but still big nonetheless.
Right.
Skorupi is also obvious. It's a little scorpion, which loses the bug type? What the heck, Game Freak?
Yeah.
It goes from being poison bug to being poison dark?
dark.
I mean, I get why it's dark, and I get why it's poison. We covered Drapion in both the poison type and dark type sections. But to replace bug when it's clearly
A bug? This is, well, it still gets access to X Scissor. This is like, because we've talked about this before, where Pokemon have like a third tertiary typing, right? Where if we look at something like Charizard, right? So if you go Charizard movesets, right? How it is by definition fire flying, but it does get certain things. Like it gets access to. Why do you get access to Thunder Punch? That's a little strange. Maybe Charizard's a bad example because it kind of has Game Freak favoritism going for it. But I mean, sure, it gets your standard litany of like normal moves, right? But that's not what I'm necessarily talking about. Like how it gets access to like Dragon Claw and Dragon Dance, right? Dragon Pulse, specific Dragon type support, while not being Dragon type, right? Not just standard coverage moves like Solar Beam. That Dragon's kind of its tertiary. It doesn't get stabbed for it, but it gets access to moves. So if we go ahead and look at Drapion, right? We have access, so it's Poison Dark. But then you look at what it gets access to a couple ground type moves, dark, poison, standard normal type stuff, especially HMs. But like it gets access to X Scissor and Bug Buzz. It gets access to Bug Bite via actual level up, right? Pin Missile. And so like Bug is kind of its tertiary typing. Meanwhile, if we look at something like I'm trying to find another example that I usually use. Starmie wouldn't be a good example. I don't know. But what I'm trying to get across is like that Pokemon will kind of fit an archetype, I guess is how I would view it, right? Or how I would word it. Where like you definitely have the one or two typings that it generally is, but it does get support from like a specific third typing. Like it gets good support from a specific third typing. And everything gets coverage. Like, so we were in a prior video, we were looking at Toad Scroll for a reason, right? Toad Scroll, of course, being a ground and grass type. So, it gets standard ground type support and grass type support. It gets things like Hex, which are coverage. It gets, your standard, normal type moves that, kind of rotate between everything. Not everything gets them, but like, most things get Protect. Not everything gets Scary Face, but enough Pokemon get Protect. Not everything gets Swift, but enough of them do. And then we look at like Venoshock, right? Poison Powder, right? So that tells me that it kind of has that tertiary typing, because Dazzling Gleam's more like, coverage move, right? This tells me that Poison would be what I would determine Poison to be, the tertiary typing of it. Not that it's not that it's supported stab wise by Poison, but it plays into the Poison archetype.
Well, if they ever add 3-type Pokemon, we know what will happen here.
Right.
Next category, Arachnids. Spinarak and Ariados are very, very obviously spiders. Specifically, Spinarak seems to resemble the Hawaiian happy face spider, because it's greenish and has that happy face on its butt. And Ariados' coloring seems to resemble the Mimorachne formicaria. Joltik is a little cute, fuzzy jumping spider, but with elements from the tick as well. But instead of sucking blood, it sucks electricity from wires. Still a pain, but much more innocent. You can't give Lyme disease to a cable. At least not yet. The scientists are working on it. Those darn cables. They deserve it. Joltik then evolves into Galvantula, which is a large tarantula. Those big fuzzy spiders that weirdos keep as pets. Dewpider and Arachnid are based on diving bell spiders. Spiders that live most of their lives underwater and use their webs to store air bubbles for them to breathe. And now, we reach the final category, the somewhat...
I actually didn't know what the diving bell spider was, and now I have to go reach out to Miko because that is a spider I didn't know about, and I need to learn about it now.
Controversial category of, are these bugs? Should these really be bug type? What's going on here? It's quite the long name, but it's worth it. First, let's get Pheromosa out of the way. This
Roach?
Ultra Beast has two origins that fans argue about all the time. Is it an American cockroach after molting and it never gets its shell back? Or is it a copepod, a tiny planktonic crustacean that looks like this? There are plenty of arguments for both that we won't get into, but it also begs the question, are crustaceans bugs? Because obviously, if Pheromosa is the American cockroach, then obviously it's a bug. But if it's a copepod, what then? And the same applies with Crustle and Dwebble as well.
Google AI overview, which I hate using, says no, I'm looking for something of more substance. Invertebrate animals that constitute one group of arthropods that are traditionally part of. Subphylum Crustacea, a large digroup. Okay. Wikipedia entry. I'm looking for anything of actual substance. I guess Wikipedia is a source. But, like, I mean, I always refer to, like, you know, things like crawfish, lobsters, right? I always refer to them as just effectively water bugs. But I guess scientifically, just a brief Google search seems to say that things like, you know, shrimp aren't bugs. They're crustaceans, not insects. So it seems like there is a division there. So crustaceans does not equal insect at a very, very base level 2-second Google search.
Are hermit crabs. And there's also parasect and paris. Some say that they are cicadas without wings, but others point to their more crab-like appearance.
Crab.
Though, personally, I think they are just sort of generic insects.
Yeah.
So, they get to be bugs. You guys get out of this not-so-sure category. I said get! But crustaceans, right? Are they bugs? Crabby and kingler aren't bug type, neither are the other shrimp and lobsters. Crustaceans share many properties with bugs though, like the exoskeleton and the large number of legs.
Right.
In fact, crustaceans are part of a larger group known as arthropods. And that group not only includes crustaceans, but also insects and arachnids. So, the argument is clearly there to make crabs bugs. But you wouldn't pick up a lobster and say, "You get this bug off of me," would you?
I mean, actually, I am that person who would look at a lobster and say, look at that water bug. I am also weird. Like...
Perhaps, in Crustal and Dwebble's case, it's because they aren't watery crustaceans like most are. Crabby and Kingler aren't bug type because they're water type instead.
Right.
But you couldn't just give Crustal and Dwebble the water type like most crustaceans are because they're not watery. So, is bug just the next best thing? Why not make them just rock type? And if crustaceans are bugs, even in the exception of the Pokemon world, then shouldn't Crabrawler be fighting bug instead of just fighting type? And then, what about the other arthropod Pokemon? Anorith and Armaldo are a Trilobite and an Anomalocaris. And then Wimpod is a Trilobite mixed with an isopod, a crustacean. Yep. Golisopod then is the giant isopod, another crustacean related to shrimp and crab.
Dude, I love these things so much. These things are so large. I love them.
Crabs, not bugs. Again, you wouldn't hand someone a plate of cocktail shrimp and say, "Hey, have a platter of insects." You'd give them a split-second panic attack until they realized you were just messing with them. And then there's Shuckle. You always ruin everything, Shuckle. Who the heck are you? You resemble a tortoise more than anything. The closest real-life thing to a Shuckle is an endolith. Freaking algae inside of a rock. Endoliths are colonies of bacteria or fungus or algae found in the pores between mineral grains of a rock, and they are often in long tubes or strings within, like Shuckle. So are we now saying that algae is a bug? Where does it end? Are you a bug? Am I a bug? Who cares? It's Pokemon. Are you perhaps a barnacle? A mollusk? What's up, Shuckle? Talk to me.
Shuckle does not share.
Well, there is another aspect of Shuckle that points us to an actual bug.
Sure.
Shuckle is said to make delicious juice out of berries.
Right.
And the scale insect is a parasite that also makes a sweet liquid to attract insects for food. And you can sort of see similarities in this freshly hatched species.
I mean, sure. Maybe if I had an entire bottle of redacted brand, definitely juice. And maybe if I squinted hard enough, maybe if I did both of those, I could see it.
But this one would imply that Shuckle is both microscopic, and each of its limbs are a completely different creature.
Right.
But then, of all of the scale insects, the one that most closely resembles Shuckle is the soft scale insect, which is yellow and is one whole being, but it's specifically the soft shell one.
Right.
So, not at all Shuckle, who has the highest defense in the game. It's tied with Mega Steelix and Mega Aggron. Look at these three. One of them is not like the other, and it's freaking mystery meat over here. So are you a bug? Are these bugs? I suppose they share enough qualities with bugs, granting them the type, I guess. They were given it for lack of a better type. Maybe the type shouldn't be called bug, it should be called exoskeleton or something. Carapace type, creepy crawlies type, hard type. No, not that one. Well, that's it for bug Pokemon. What do you think? Pretty obvious, right? Well, the next type will be more interesting then, I promise you. So until that next time, please never stop using your noggin and check out these other awesome videos right here. Thanks a million.
I'm gonna be honest, I actually really like this. Somebody who's a huge bug type fan, I love me some Galissapod. I wish I got anything other than emergency exit and slot 2 or emergency exit or the hidden ability slot. Man, I'm so sad that it just doesn't. It just can't. But I mean, honestly, I thought this was great. I learned some stuff today. This is honestly very enlightening. This is just this is so cool to watch. I definitely see why people recommended taking a look at some of these videos. I think that an interesting point he does bring up in regards to Masquerain. Gen 3 is kind of when Pokemon seem to, like, you know, split from, you know, a lot of these like, you know, real worlds, Hawaiian Spider being, you know, Spinarak, right, or at least inspiring Spinarak, into generic insect ? Right? And thus that's, you know, what we start seeing down the line as well, where we see, you know, certain traits kind of effectively put in a blender, and then, you know, Gratzby got the thing, right? So you have things like, you know, Dwebble, you even things like Parax, right? Like just generic insect, right? But I mean, obviously that's still Gen 1, right? Like, obviously the insinuation there with Parasect and Parasect is that it's oh god, what is it called again? It's the funny fungus that takes it over, right? And that's the insinuation there, is that it's it's being taken over and turned into a zombie by the actual mushroom itself, right? The actual fungus. But we start to see, as the generations progress, more and more insect-like traits from different insects, like the Carablast example, right? Where Carablast is, like, you know, kind of like 3 different things kind of in one, and then you have, like, you know, Excelgor, and this was honestly, Gen 5 was the renaissance of bug type. Like, bug type really came into its own in Gen 5 and really solidified itself as an offensive typing, with things like Excelgor, because it was a fast special attacker, but you have, like, you know, like generic things kind of coming together to make something new, so it's honestly really interesting to see the progression, as well as kind of think about the origins and why things look the way they do. So I thought this was great. Thank you everyone for watching, and thank you Lockstin Gnoggin for honestly just making a really good, thought-provoking video. Thank you everyone, and I will see you all in the next one.